I lean heavily into the people leadership side of things and try to balance that in a very strong way with the technical and the playbook leadership. And I think you definitely have more opportunity to impact more people in a smaller setting, in a one-to-one or one-to-a-few relationship. We would all universally say human in the loop is required when making AI technology successful.
When you notice that, all right, if I have a challenge, it's not about reps not performing, or it's actually about reps not performing. They have skill problems, or we have system problem, or we have, culture problem. How do you really navigate that? Can you give us some examples of things that you notice, like going through this change?
Yeah, that's a great question. A really simple way to do it is just
Hey Konnor, how's it going, man?
all right, Michael.
So super pumped for today. I
Yeah,
guess.
likewise.
Yeah. Before we kickstart this, let's talk about your background. Where did you start? What happened? What are you doing right now? So tell us.
Well, it was 1986, and I'm just joking. Yeah, so I'm a VP of sales, so that's it for a 70-ish million software company. But in my sales career started, I guess I had some entrepreneurial efforts when I was like a young teenager. But in earnest in my career, started in sales and telecom and carried a quota, went through the challenges of carrying a quota, when it got into tech sales after several years and helped open a regional office for a more mature, established tech company, but was the first employee there and kind of de facto on the floor leader, et cetera, et cetera. So did really well there for a while, but always wanted to get into a true startup environment, a tech startup environment. And my wife was supportive of that despite the risks. And so in 2017 got into what was called RFPIO at the time. I was the fifth employee and was fortunate to enter into a really good spot, great product market fit. And I entered as a senior sales rep, and then took over the head of sales in 2019 and have been growing things there since then. They're here. Now we're called Responsive for anybody that cares. But yeah, I've been growing since then. So overseeing new business sales roles, solution consulting, business development. It's been a co-founder-led company, still the same co-founders from the early days. So from a business standpoint, very interesting. And the bigger we get, the more unique we are, because those dynamics have not changed as we grow larger. So I've been very fortunate, really good timing, lots of good people around me, and a very supportive wife along the way as well. So I'm sure you can relate to that. Yeah. But that's the background.
I love it. And you have three boys. Is that correct?
3 boys. You got it. 3 boys. 12, 10, and 8. And yeah, that's my other full-time job. Try to remember to prioritize my life so that they get the best of me, if I can.
That's awesome, man. Like, it sounds like you made this shift from working for larger orgs and got into a startup and never, looked back.
Yeah, I was in a 900 person sales team, and then I was in a 300, 400 person sales team. And then I went to a 2-person sales team, and with the CEO and co-founders literally standing over my shoulder while I was doing demos. And he would reach over, and if he ever listens to this, he'll have a laugh, but he would reach over and like hit the mute button on the phone. That was when we were still using phones for our sales calls. And he would talk over the prospects that were trying to talk to me, like to tell me, hey, you need to tell them about this. You need to ask them this question. So yes, that was a very different experience, but it's exactly what I wanted and have not looked back. And it's been a great ride. And I'd probably continue it through my career if I go somewhere else at some point in the future, whether by my choice or they ask me to leave for whatever reason. I'll probably go back into that same environment and try to build another thing. That's I think what energizes me.
Look, we share the same sentiment, again, being another early stage startup and building my own. But I want to hear from your perspective, because it's always interesting to hear other people's mindset about things. So tell me, what really interests you about the startups compared to larger organizations, especially when it comes to sales?
My perspective is probably not that unique. I imagine yourself and others would share the same thing. You can have an impact. Your decisions can have a direct impact on the direction and the growth of the company at large. You can make decisions and make moves quickly and turn and be more agile as a whole company and even as a subset. Uh, as you grow, you can still be more agile and act with speed. I lean heavily into the people leadership side of things and try to balance that in a very strong way with the technical and the playbook leadership. And I think you definitely have more opportunity to impact more people in a smaller setting, in a one-to-one or one to a few relationship. Because the bigger we get, the more I'm in one-to-many settings, and you don't have as much personal impact in the one-to-many. I think you can kind of become a soundbite in that environment, and I'm not good at sound bites anyway, so I don't think that suits my. I don't think that suits my style or my ability, my skills and abilities. And so the one to one or the one to few is where I believe I can have more impact. And I like that about the startup.
Gotcha. So, have you always like had this idea of becoming a leader, or it just naturally happened, or maybe you had a leader who helped you? So, I'm curious, how did you, make that transition from being an individual contributor to a leader?
Yeah, all of the above. So all through my life have been either chosen or thrust into leadership roles, informally, formally. I've always known I liked seeing others develop, and when others achieve either development milestones or have light bulb moments, and being a part of that growth has been something that's really satisfying for me, and I think is something I should be doing in my life. And so the leadership role naturally allows that to happen. And to my last thing I was saying, that focuses more on the people leadership than the playbook leadership, because naturally it's about overcoming objections for them in their skill development, identifying what it is that they're struggling with, and then helping them on a path and a way to get through those things. But when I wanted to join a startup, it was to be a leader. It was to be a sales leader. I think for most of the AEs out there, I don't know, I'd say 70% of them, if you ask them, what is your career trajectory? What do you want to do in the next 5 years, 10 years? VP of sales, VP of sales, VP of sales. That's like, the thing that I think a lot of AEs want to get to, even though there's a bunch of other paths and there's roles beyond VP of sales as well. Um, so I was one of those at one time. That's what I would say back in the day. And I knew I wanted to get into a leadership role in joining a startup. And by nature of being in a tiny company and working directly for the CEO and co-founder, I was a leader. And I approached it that way. By title, I wasn't, but I totally looked at it as I'm a leader in this company
Hmm.
because I'm talking directly with the guy that's making the executive decisions to run this company. The other co-founders weren't even employees of the company when I started. It was basically just me and another guy and the CEO. And so later on, when we formalized it, it was more just a formality of becoming a leader. And then but then came the reporting responsibilities and, the managing. One of the co-founders, first thing he asked me when we interviewed for me to get the job, said, I'm concerned, or I just want to make sure you can handle if you have to fire people. And I was like, I can take it. And I have certainly handled it many times over at this point. But that was some of the formality that came with the leadership. But I was always expecting to become a leader and acted like one even before I had that.
Let's talk about what you just shared. So, you always wanted to be a leader. I've been following you on LinkedIn, and based on what I see, you're really focused on human coaching, and you just said it, instead of focusing on playbook. So, human coaching, human leadership, being really close to your people and having one-on-ones. How many people, by the way, do you guys have in sales, if you don't mind me asking?
So sales for us, that covers sales, solution consulting, and business development. And globally, we've got 80, 90 in those roles globally.
How do you ensure that they basically get this one-on-one attention? And I know you're big in coaching. I want to have a deeper dive into this. How do you make sure that they actually get what they need?
I hope they are. Right. um, Certainly have had to scale that through the years. And I would say the way I'll choose to answer that now, there's a lot of ways we could talk through that, is replicating frameworks of skill, leadership, coaching, development from leadership through the levels. I've got, I think, 4 levels in my sales org now. So got multiple, levels of leadership that it's not just, I don't have any direct field sales direct reports anymore, but it's not just my direct reports it's also my direct reports and their direct reports to their direct reports. So that the critical thing from my perspective and the scale we've grown to is replicating it through the levels. And you can't do that by accident, or you can't fully let that come to you. You have to be intentional, not accidental. And I think being intentional requires you to have some frameworks, call them tools, call them playbooks, whatever you want for the people leadership side and for the coaching and development side. So I've got some tools that the leaders that work for me would certainly be familiar with that I will use on repeat that have to do with personal development, skill development. How do you have a coaching conversation? What's the dynamic for bringing a high level of challenge, but also bringing a high level of support? And how do you create a culture that's healthy in those dynamics? So I actually have tools and frameworks for conversations, even some graphics, diagrams that go with those. They're very practical that allow me to replicate what I have done or what others have taught me into the leaders that are reporting to me, that are managing the field, that are coaching, the individual reps. And you've got to have a check with the field every so often. So I try to do some skip level meetings, which if somebody doesn't know what that is, that's basically you take a level down or 2 levels down from your direct reports and you have one-on-one meetings and just ask how things are going to get a pulse from the field. Because if you just manage your leaders and then you assume you think you know what's going on out there, you're probably wrong. So you probably shouldn't assume too much.
Like, I really love this. It seems like you already build a system, or you used to practice. Right now, you're coaching your coaches. So
That's right.
I have a system for coaching the coach to make sure that they can transfer this knowledge. And you have different buckets. You already mentioned it could be for skill development, it could be for personal development. And then I really love this approach to always just go a few lines below and have one-on-ones with even reps just to see what's going on. Because how do you want to get a reality check? Yes, when numbers are not met, you want to get your leaders just to come up with their excuses or not. I think that's a very smart idea, an important idea to do. But many leaders, again, just hide behind, I don't have bandwidth. I don't have bandwidth to do this stuff. But I think this is part of the job. This is part of leadership, just to be involved with every level of inside your org. Otherwise, you deal with chaos later. So.
Yeah, and you might say, well, I'm in a high growth scale up company, and you're at 25 million, 50 million, something like that. You're like, I'm in a high growth scale up company. I can't prioritize that. One, I think you could argue that you have to prioritize it, and you could go down that path and make points on that. 2, somebody could definitely disagree with me on this, but I don't really want to be in a company or organization that doesn't prioritize that. So I'm going to work to make money and to provide for the needs that I have in my life and my family's life. And that's a transaction. But I'm also there for many, many hours a week. I'm traveling to do it and spending time with these people in person and on Zoom calls. And I want that to be a fulfilling time when it's happening and healthy and life-giving. And so if I just treat that as a transaction all the time, that's not going to do that. And if I look at it holistically, I need that 40, 50, 60 hours a week to be similar to the way I live my life and the rest of my hours in the week with my family and friends, and not behave completely differently. I'm not putting my kids on corrective action plans, obviously. Yeah. And I don't call my employees my kids or treat them like my 10-year-old or whatever. So, it obviously doesn't all cross over. But if you're not, getting back to the point, if you're just treating it transactionally, then I think there's a lot lost. And personally for me, I don't want to be in an environment that's like,
Make a lot of sense. Do you believe your reps burn leads practicing on client calls? When it comes to giving them one-on-one coaching sessions, you just don't have the bandwidth, so you get rid of them altogether? Or maybe you notice that your team spends a lot of time on non-revenue tasks like taking notes, updating CRM, or drafting emails. These are the exact challenges we solve for other revenue leaders like yourself. With Sell Me the Spend AI Coach, you can offer your reps role-play sessions at scale while automating one-on-one coaching sessions based on your best practices and methodology. Also, AI will take care of all their non-revenue tasks, like note-taking, CRM updates, draft the email for them, so they can focus on constant improvement while you're focusing on one thing and one thing only: revenue growth. If you're interested in learning more about the clients we are working with or use cases that might be beneficial to you, check us out at sellmethespend.ai. I want to ask you a question, and it might be a little off base. Does your parenting, ever bleed into leadership? Because you have 3 kids, so I'm just
all right.
curious.
Yeah, occasionally I'll get comments from my team where they're like, "Oh, that's Dad Konnor coming out." Like, we'll be on a meeting and I'll say something. I can't give you any specific examples, but I'll say something. And they're like, "That's the Dad Konnor right there." And I think I stop and I'm like, "Yeah, I guess it is, but so be it." So I can roll with it. I'm very much who I am, unapologetically, and willing to, apologize or take ownership for mistakes. But in terms of how I operate, my personality, I don't try to alter that too much in how I lead and how I am with my team. And so those things definitely come out. Yeah.
All right. Look, you with the current company, you basically was a founding, seller, right?
Yeah.
And then you walk the walk, you grow, and you grew into the leadership. Right now, you're running an 80, something sales organization, right? So I assume in each stage you had to go through some changes for your playbook, and that comes through again coaching practices. That comes to changing system. When you notice that, all right, if I have a challenge, it's not about reps not performing, or it's actually about reps not performing. They have skill problems, or we have system problem, or we have culture problem. How do you really navigate that? Because with each stage, I've seen this. For example, at Hopin, joined them like around Series A and up to Series C. Many things could change. Can you give us some examples of things that you notice, like going through this change?
Yeah, that's a great question. A really simple way to do it is just every calendar year. It's not strategic, but there's a reason why companies have fiscal cadences, right? Quarterly and fiscal years. I don't know where that originated, but it's like, okay, about 90 days, that's about the cycle time for this thing to happen, or for us to find out if this thing is working, or if this employee is doing well, or if this new pricing is going well. So keeping with the natural rhythms of your, the fiscal periods is good. But when you're really early, you got to go even faster than that. A lot of times you can't wait for the quarter to start or end, or the year to start or end. When you get bigger, that becomes kind of natural, because like working from where we are now and then looking backwards, we've got rhythms in place where we're doing quarterly look backs with a narrative summary, as well as the data analysis on our rep performance, our segment performance, our pipeline and funnel performance, all of that. And that quarterly look back includes identifying gaps in our go-to-market that the broader revenue and sales revenue go-to-market leadership team huddles on, spends a significant amount of time on in a concentrated period of time, like a week or 2 weeks, and then comes up with recommendations for the business to fill those gaps and get better in those areas. That's on a quarterly cadence. So when talking about the natural rhythms of a fiscal year, some of that stuff can start to make sense. And I'm sure somebody would say, "Oh no, not fiscal. You should do it every 62 days, or for this reason or that." Fine, that's fine. But have a cadence that you're on, I guess, I think is the point. Earlier days, very early days, it started with, okay, let's try this with a prospect, with a customer, with a CEO, with an employee, whatever the thing is that you're doing, the playbook or the improvement you're trying to make. Let's try this. And how fast is the cycle, the feedback loop? Okay, so with a new pricing presentation, let's say, we come up with we huddle, we have our pricing, it's in a pricing book, and we've been using it for 2 months. And one of the reps says, hey, I think I can double that on a deal. So we huddle, we talk about it, we say, okay, your next call, try to double it. So they take a sales call and they get to the pricing portion. And what used to be 20,000, they say, yeah, that starts at 40,000. And then we get back together later that day and, hey, Joey, how'd it go? What'd they say to the 40,000? They didn't bat an eye. Let's do it. So we huddle with the team and we say, hey, our new price is now 40,000. So how fast is the cycle time that you can actually put it into practice, get feedback, and then make the change? And I think that can determine like what triggers can help you determine what triggers you're looking for. Because if you know something has a 1 day cycle time, then you can literally test it and improve on it every single day. If you know something has to go through a full sales cycle and your sales cycle is going to be 30 days, 90 days, 120 days, a year, then you know it's going to take that long to kind of figure it out. Yeah, so that's some of the stuff off the top of my head. And through the years, like from that very, very rapid change to where we are now, where we're like on these quarterly cadences, I would say the things that I looked for were really changes in the KPIs, either for sellers, for our pipeline, or for our revenue. And so if we see a change in a KPI, it's like, okay, what's driving that? And where's the gap? And that can trigger a change. If you're on a quarterly cadence, that's going to trigger a change for the end of the quarter. If you're earlier and you have shorter cadences and you have these shorter cycle times and windows that you can make these changes, then that KPI dip is going to trigger you to make a change tomorrow, because you don't have to wait to get 12 leaders together to come to a conclusion on the thing. So hopefully that gets into it. It's a great question. And, I could go back in the annals of history and probably pull up some actual examples, but those are some of my initial thoughts.
I appreciate you sharing. No, it makes a lot of sense, and you share a lot of great stuff, and we can take this conversation in so many different directions. But I wanted to add a quick, comment into it, and then ask a question. To your point, early days, it's all about hypothesis. How quickly can we test something, and you're really just trying to do quick experimentations to see what sticks. And you had a really good example about pricing. That's pretty much like everybody's before. I don't know exactly what ARR number we are talking about, but the earliest stages, like from pre-seed C to Series A, you keep experimenting to see what really makes sense to find a product market fit, if you will. And then when the team grows, uh, you're talking about KPIs. You're talking about most probably compensation packages. Maybe early days, even A's don't even have that. You just get paid on a regular monthly basis. This is your salary.
Yeah.
That's your OT, and that's pretty much it. So I wanted to ask, from your journey, your experience, what's been the hardest stage of running this business, especially with retention?
I think that, gosh, every stage has different challenges. That's a given. I think in my experience so far, the hardest stage is probably the one we just came out of, which was getting to 50 million. So getting from you accelerate past 25 million. And I'm using the millions of ARR to define the stages. So,
Yep.
Somebody else might define a stage differently than that. Number of sellers,
Yep.
number of customers, something like that. So getting through the 25 million and it really accelerating past that. And you always hear, or you will hear from your PE firm or from a former co-founder, a battle-hardened veteran in SaaS or whatever. Oh yeah, this stage is hard. This stage is hard. Here's your milestone, and you don't know until you've done it. And it's true. It is absolutely true. Like those are big peaks to the 1 million, the 5 million, the 10 million, the 25 million, the 50 million. They're big peaks to get through. So from the 25 to the 50, we really accelerated past the 25 and did really well in that space leading up to the 50. But to get over the hill of 50, it felt like it was just like everything coming at us to try to stop us from making it. Whether that was the economy or AI stuff, being commercially available and turning everything topsy-turvy, or global wars, or competitors in our market, whatever it is, Now, from a retention standpoint, what we're seeing now in retention is heavily impacted by the technology transformation that we were experiencing around that 50 million mark, which is from Gen AI technology. And so, from a new business sales standpoint, we pushed, scraped and clawed up that hill to get over that 50 million mark. But what was happening then, a couple of years ago, is now was a leading indicator for the retention challenges today, because it's a lot of it is the disruption that came from the Gen AI technology that really, when ChatGPT broke on the scene and people started asking it to tell them stories in October of 2022, I think that's when it was. And there was like this moment of like, what is happening? What is this thing that does this? That started the effects that we're experiencing now, that where retention is more and more difficult, because there's this revolution in technology that we haven't seen in a generation, that opens up all kinds of exploration and new opportunities for companies to improve their business processes. We're on high alert for our entire customer base that they have other options that never existed before. When they purchased and evaluated and vetted out the value of our solution, they have other options now that didn't exist then, and they need to look at them as a business, and they need to be looking at that. So from a new business side, getting over the 50, I think, was probably the hardest. From a retention side, it's really where we are today, right now.
I really love the transparency. Many people don't talk about this stuff. Like, hey, everything is great. The business is growing. There is no problem. And I think it's a blinding, because each stage, like even when you're really, really early stage, passing that death valley and get to $1 million to three to five, it comes with many, many challenges. Especially even if you're experienced. Like one of the things that I struggle a lot. I'm a third time founder, and everybody's like, "You've seen it before, so you had to be able to pull things off." No, you got macroeconomics. So you mentioned about like all the wars and AI and so many other things that are happening around us that directly have direct effects on our businesses and how we react and survive and thrive. That really turns us to leaders. So, what's the strategy moving forward? Because you already have the clients, you build a relationship, but they have options, and everybody's facing similar challenges, right? So, what are some of the strategies that you introduce to the team to support them, to basically keep them around? Because we know we can get rid of the team, but that doesn't necessarily save the day. So, what are the things that you do?
Yeah, we've gone down the path. So first of all, we have a unified value message for the whole field, whether that's new business SDRs, new business sales reps, solution consultants, client sales, customer success, professional services, everybody. You have a unified value message that is, you're all telling that same story. And it's not static. It does change and evolve over time. So we've had to evolve that with AI technology, for example. But we are telling the same story, so that we know we're bought in as a company. This is how we're saying we drive value for the market. And that could be wrong, because that's a big move. That's a big bet you're making. You're saying, hey, as a company, this is the bet we're making to tell this story, that this is how we drive value. And what if it only resonates with 20% of your market, and you made the wrong story, you crafted the wrong story, and you're telling the wrong story? So it's a big bet. It's risky. Anyway, that's a foundational piece, is having the same value story, and because that creates continuity when you're calling prospects, when you're going to events, when you're having webinars, when you're sending out your messages to build pipeline. You're using the same language and telling the same story as the new business seller who picks that up, as the solution consultant who drives through tech evaluation in approve stage kind of environment. Same story as the presentation that the AE does at the end when they're landing the executive meetings and the executive presentation with the value case. Same story as the onboarding consultant and solution or the professional services team that onboards the customer, and the customer success team that is responsible for long-term value. So there's that continuity through the whole customer journey, customer lifecycle. And I've learned that a lot from my experience that I've been going through now, and some of the other leaders that have come on board and really said, this is a must. You have to have this to scale and grow and get to these levels and retain as well. And then the other piece, I'd say really practically, because that's a company effort, what I just mentioned. Within the sales org, or and crossing over into retention, customer success, client sales, we have tried really hard, and we're still trying to build real, authentic, and bulletproof value cases. And so we've tried to really put a playbook and a motion together it's not revolutionary. We're borrowing from everybody else. We're doing the same thing a bunch of companies are doing, but this is what we're doing, and this is the thing that I think is making a difference, or we're hoping it does. Is we collect the metrics, we find out what that business case is, we get the validation of that with the prospect and with buy-in from champions, exec sponsors in the new business side, and that carries through along with the value story that I just mentioned. That actual value case, which has metrics, has numbers, is attached to their business objectives, carries through into value realization as a customer. And so the idea is they can look back and hearken back to the value case and say, yes, we're realizing this value we anticipated long term. And that's what somebody that in my company calls value nirvana, where it's being delivered on the front end, it's being promised or talked about on the front end, it's being delivered on the back end, and then the product is driving it as well. Product development continues to drive it as well through customer feedback. So the value case leading into value realization is probably our one of our primary tools of fortification of the revenue right now, because there's so many options, and there's really easy and cheap options, frankly, to try to solve the business challenge that we're solving and many other SaaS companies are solving with the revolution of AI technology. So we've got to have a real reason that's compelling and that makes sense, that's authentic. It's not just you put into a calculator and this is what you get. It's like really vetted and validated by the people. And you're saying, if we don't do this, this is the value we're losing out on. Or anything we compare this to, it should be compared against this value realization we've been experiencing over the past year, 2, 3, 4, 5.
What you're doing is really important and it's really hard. So I want to hear how you're doing it. How you're doing it, because it's 80 like different teams.
Yeah.
You talk about CS or delivery team, like again, retention, upselling, cross. It's something that again they might lack in terms of skill sets, and having the same message across the board. We understand like what it means in terms of value for the buyer. The whole experience is always seamless. Someone didn't promise me something else and you deliver something. And also for your business, standpoint, you can then during I don't know QBR or whatever it might be, 62 days that you mentioned earlier, or
Yeah.
whatever it might be, and sit down and really assess. But how did you make it happen? Because I know this is a very hard thing to do.
Yeah. Well, it certainly wasn't, I certainly am not the one that can take the claim. I've been an instrumental part in delivery and accountability and implementation, etc. So the two things I just talked through are, one, the value story. So we really several years ago we had ideas of a value story in the sales team, on the new business sales team that was out prospect facing and telling the story in the market. And we kind of had a statement of like, this is our mission. This is the value this is our mission internally as sales. This is the value we deliver to prospects that we're talking to them about, our value story. But that was definitely not carried beyond our conversations with any continuity. And so with getting to that 50 million inflection point, and some of the leaders we brought into the company that were beyond where, frankly, any of us in our company had been. So all the leaders in our company up until that 50 million, every $100,000 of ARR was the first time we'd been that far. And every million was the first time we'd been that far. So we were figuring it out as we went all along the way. And so we realized, okay, we want to get to, we want to get through the next valley and get to the next peak, and then the next peak. We have to bring people in that have experience and done that, not in advisory capacities, but actually full-time bring on. And that was one of the very first things that was said. So I can stand on the shoulders of, those that came in and said, this is what you guys need to do. What is your value story? And it's like, well, it's like this. And it's like, well, that's okay, but it's not carrying through the entire business. And it's not, it doesn't have that continuity into value realization as well. So we did it through our having a limited set of what we call big moves at the company. And those are defined by executive and senior leadership, which I'm a part of. And we then drive the entire business, especially the go-to-market org, with those big moves in mind. And some companies want to use an OKR framework or whatever. If you're a small company and you have 15 employees, you can do OKRs, but just define what your top 3 moves are. And then in your normal cadences in team meetings and executive meetings and your stand-ups, make sure you're aligning to the big move with all the activities that you're taking on. We're taking on a new thing. Does this align to a big move? No. Okay. Do we need to do it? Well, okay, no, we don't need to do it. And that's something that you can do at any size. And so we align these big moves, and our big moves in the very early, like in the early days of creating this value messaging, the aligning on a core narrative, core value message was primary big move. That was big move number 1. And so it was the whole company effort across the board, all the leaders, down to the field level. And it got the whole effort of the whole company. It wasn't easy. Change management wasn't easy. It took a lot of repetition, took a lot of accountability, took some less than fun conversations at times. So very hard, but absolutely the right thing to do. And then on the value delivery, the value case and the value delivery, we were already doing that. I mean, every sales organization is going to have some sort of business case, of course, and a lot of them will have a ROI calculator on their website. We just formalized it. So we actually used some consultants for a little while that helped us understand a value case playbook. And that was helpful. But then we formalized it with some of our talent we already had in-house that was just the right kind of fit to drive that motion with our sales field. And we started at the top of the funnel and just continued, or I guess the customer lifecycle rather. And we continue to work through each stage of the customer lifecycle to make sure our value case, because our value story is already there, then the value case needs to be adapted at each stage of the customer journey. And again, it stayed as a big move for our company. So we had the executive and senior leadership focus on it, and everybody knew. Every all hands meeting, we're presenting the big moves. We're saying, here's what we're doing, value story, value case. This has to be carried through the whole customer lifecycle. And, then there's all the field execution, getting down to the nitty gritty. But from a leadership level, a strategy level, that's how we did it. And it's not easy at all. I mean, we're still, I don't think you ever arrive. Just like being a professional seller, you never arrive. You've never made it. You might unlock the tricks of your industry or the tricks of your market, but if you ever think you've arrived, you're probably behind at that point. Because then Gen AI comes and punches you in the face, And so anyway, we still haven't arrived. We'll never arrive. It's always a continued effort, and we're certainly on the path.
Make absolute sense. It's never like a one size fit all. We build it right now. We are good to go until we exit or something happens. I wanted to ask a follow-up question on this because it's really interesting. It's something that I'm dealing with. I'm not at 50 million ARR. We're early stages, but I'm trying to, understand how to really prioritize. So the way we look at it is we have some major, clients. So the feedback loop makes sense. Expansion makes sense. The logo makes sense. Everything makes sense. So for now, that's how we are actually, going through this exercise. But for a later stage company like yours, I assume you're again looking at your clientele and have one-on-one conversations and see the real impact of your solution on the business, and then you build this narrative. Is that typically how you go about building this?
Yeah. So the practical how to build the narrative, particularly, yes. So one thing that helped us is we had the industry and domain experience in-house because we were built by co-founders that knew the challenge that we were solving. Just like you in your business, you're like, I know this challenge. I'm going to sell a solution to this challenge that I intimately understand. Our co-founders intimately understood the challenge that our software is solving, as did I when I came on board, which is why I joined the company, or why I joined this startup specifically, because I knew the challenge firsthand. So we had the benefit of a lot of people that knew the challenge of the industry and the product market fit and why it made sense and why it was valuable. And by the time we got to the scale that we did to really need that value story and the value case to keep on growing, all the people that had that domain experience, pretty much all of us were still around. which is very rare. So we have the co-founders, we have some of the early technology team, we have some of the early sales and go-to-market team, myself included. And so we leaned on our experience heavily to craft that story formally and to put that value message together. So we did a lot of working sessions, a lot of focus group sessions, and then we would go put it in front of a trusted customer and say, is this making sense to you? This wheel, whatever it is that resonating? Yes, no, okay, reiterate. And I think we went through a series of sprints in 45 days to come to a produced value story that we were ready to put in the hands of our field. And it included, internal domain experience, which we had a abundance of, which not all companies do, and trusted, customers. And we did start to get into analyst conversations at that point, at that scale of our growth. Really early days, you might not do analyst review, but we did start getting an analyst review as well to make sure that the broader market at large was interested in what we're saying is valuable.
I really love this because I'm going through this exercise. I'm going to steal it from you. One thing that I was kind of like was about to jump the gun and say, hey, messaging seems good. Should we really just shoot it all over like the website and LinkedIn and everything? Then we took a step back. It's like, look, this is going to be a big effort. We have tons of deliveries. Like so many things are happening. We are ramping 2 new people. And for our stage and our size, I think we need that focus. But to your point, we should keep bringing this message to our customer advisory, like the best customers we have, the most active ones, to really get the truth out of it and run it like a discovery conversation. I assume. Okay, this is a good one. I'm going to take from you.
Happy to hear that.
I appreciate it. To wrap it up, we mentioned Gen AI a lot, and I'm sure again, any company at this stage have a flair of Gen AI, some functionalities that use AI. But I want to hear from your perspective as a VP of sales. How do you see the future? How do you see 3 to 5 years right now? Like, what's going on? Like, what's going to happen next?
So the one thing I know right now is the pace of the technology innovation it cannot be matched by us, by our ability and capacity to process the information, keep up with the updates, learn it, learn how to use it, put it into practice, think of ways that it can solve challenges. Like, I don't know what the cycle time is for an average tech go-to-market leader to learn a new technology, solution through it, and figure out how it can be valuable to your business, and then implement it and use it. But I do know the cycle time of AI developments, and it's 1 week. And I can guarantee you the cycle time of go-to-market execution on new technology is a lot longer than 1 week. So one thing I think is that starting a year and a half ago, you're not going to be able to keep up with all of it. Like, we already struggled with that before anyway, with SaaS offerings, developing fast, new SaaS players. It's 10x faster now than it was then. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a very, very prescient reality that we have to accept and not freak out over. Can't let it get to you, can't let it drag you down, can't let it give you FOMO, can't let it, make you feel like you're doing a bad job or you're dropping the ball. Like, you just can't keep up. There's no way it's possible. Now, what do we look at for the future? Because you still have to think about the future. The further you go in your leadership levels and executive career, you've got to be able to be a time traveler, right? And further out every level you go. And so I do have to be thinking 3-ish years out in the role that I'm in, and trying to separate it from my business and my industry specifically, but generally as, a VP of sales, bringing it all the way back to what we were talking about at the early days. It's still about the people. Human in the loop is part of AI success. And I think anybody using or selling or developing AI technology, other than some of the, fanatics that are like, we're going to do everything with AI and AI is going to take over this and that and that, we would all universally say human in the loop is required when making AI technology successful. And so as we look at 3 years, I think we've within the last month or so, we've crossed the threshold of people in my position. If you're not curious about and going after usage of AI tech to drive value for your business, then you're already behind. You don't have to have it figured out. But if you're not curious about it and trying it and experimenting and solutioning through it, you're already behind and you're getting outpaced. So you can't keep up, but you also can't sit back because it's not going to wait for you. So the people need to be from the executive level all the way to the field level. We have competencies in our interviews that are about usage of Gen AI technology because we need every single person in our organization to have that curiosity and to have that desire and willingness to adopt and solution through and use AI to drive the value of the business. And that takes people to do that. So I think looking in the future right now, you've got to build a team that has that as a core competency. And that starts with your hiring and the people you're making job offers to immediately. And that's going to have impacts. How long does it take to ramp an SDR? 30 days. How long does it take to ramp a mid-market rep? 90 days. How long does it take to ramp a strategic rep? 180 days. So you're already talking about getting to half a year to a year out, where if you're not hiring those people now that have that competency and that desire, then you're going to be behind by a year by the time you get to a year from now. So that's the first thing, is recognize that you can't keep up. Don't try to keep up. But then the hiring practices and the people you're bringing on, they're going to be the ones that are driving the AI technology. And if you're not bringing people on that are able to and have a desire to do that, it's going to be hurt. You're going to be hurting later, because there's going to come a day in 2 years where we're going to be hiring go-to-market AI executives in our companies, and they're going to be paid a lot of money to know how to drive go-to-market motions, leveraging AI to a hyper efficient level. So getting beyond a year, talking about 2-3 years, that's probably what I'm seeing as well. And so you don't want to be the one that's like, okay, we kind of didn't figure it out early. We didn't hire people in that were curious and eager about this. Now we're going to bring in, some high-paid executive that knows how to do this and this is the resume they built over the last 3 years, and they've done this at this company and this company, to come in and solve this for us. And I think that's going to be a reality for some companies, but the way you can get ahead of it now is to get the people in the right positions and recognize that the people are the ones that are going to drive it and use it.
I really love what you said, because you focus on curiosity. The skill set of people you're hiring today might be even irrelevant in a couple of months to come, except for, again, if we're talking salespeople, we want good conversations. So many things that we do with prospecting, or even with, you mentioned about ramping reps, onboarding reps, things are changing. So if people are not curious to learn and get their hands dirty and always have this top of mind that I need to get better, most probably the person you're hiring and spend a lot of time and money and energy ramping, maybe in 3 to 6 months they become completely irrelevant.
Yeah. How scary is that?
Yeah. So it is happening.
Anyways,
Anyways,
how do you run a business? You can't run a business like that.
yeah, that's pretty much it. And I think you're really on point, because it's not only about knowing technology, it's about having people who are open to it, because they might actually bring something to the org.
Yeah.
And you'll be surprised, like a 20-year-old kid can literally learn something that completely shift the way we run our go-to-market, and we see it like, I don't know, I'm not one of those, but you see crazy things are happening. So you need a new breed of people, I would say. Just be curious.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, totally do. And I hope I'm in that class. Like you get to a certain age and you're like, am I still young enough to be able to fit and do that? It's like, yes, I am. I absolutely am.
I love it. All right, man. Look, really enjoyed the conversation, Konnor. I appreciate you sharing, and hope you guys enjoyed it as well. And I guess until next time.
Yeah.
Bye for now.
Thanks, Michael. See ya.
Cheers.